The Square Ball Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the show. It's brought to you by The Athletic and The Square Ball. Dan here from The Square Ball. Phil Hay, of course, from The Athletic, who is on Zoom on a beautiful Monday morning in West Yorkshire. And a reminder that for a limited time, you can get 15% off the big three legal services. That's wills, probate and conveyancing with Levi Solicitors. Just head to levisolicitors.co.uk/Monday Club to take advantage of that discount, or you can quote Monday Club when you contact Levi's. You can also get 10% off your legal fees on everything else, legal services for both you personally and for your business. levisolicitors.co.uk/Monday Club. Hello, Phil. You all right?
Good morning. I'm well, thank you.
Yeah, should we start the show off? Before we hit the 15-minute timer, I don't want to use up some precious seconds of our allocated 15-minute debrief of the weekend's game. Let's play a clip of what we said on the Phil Hay Show over on the Athletic feed towards the back end of the week, because stopped clock and all that, got it absolutely spot on.
I just don't think I particularly fancy Leeds to win this, but I wonder if an afternoon of madness might end in a 2-2 draw or something like that.
What will happen is we will come home exhausted. That's what will happen.
Without a doubt.
2-2, exhausted. Phil, 15 minutes starts now.
It always amuses me whenever any player or manager comes to Leeds, because no matter what they think about Leeds, they don't actually know what Leeds are until they get in the door. And then it usually takes about a week or two for them to fully discover. And I was looking at Allardyce after Newcastle's penalty for the 1-1, and I was thinking, you see, this is it, and this is what you have to cope with. This is what you're going to have to live with for as long as you're here inside the building. I don't know. Every club and every fan base think that their club are kind of unique in having things that define them or things going wrong. But at Leeds, it actually seems to be true. And that passage of play from Bamford's missed penalty to Wilson finishing his within about 3 minutes at the other end of the pitch was just Leeds United as we've all come to understand it. I think, joking aside, critical moment in the game, critical moment in the season. Again, one that we're now firmly at the stage where there's no way of knowing for sure whether that is a good point on Saturday or whether it's two very, very big points dropped. I think because of the way it went with the penalty, it was a game Leeds should have won, and I think they would have won it from 2-0 up. I would have felt quite confident about that. But if they stay up by a point, and you'll say that a draw at home to Newcastle was a really good result, because they are a really efficient, competent team, Newcastle. I feel like they've got good, high-quality players from front to back, but they are still missing, and perhaps this is going to come for them with the extra investment that they'll get and Champions League football if it materialises. They are still lacking that little bit of stardust. I think that little bit of elite class that means that games like that, which from 2-1 up, they should have won. They should have taken 3 points from get away from you. But it was gutsy from Leeds. It was brave. It needed to be. And in general, Allardyce got everything that he was looking for. He wanted them to score first. He wanted them to make sure that they didn't lose. He wanted them to make sure that if they conceded or they went behind, it didn't develop into 3-0, 4-0, 5-0, a total capitulation. So in a lot of respects, it tick the boxes, but they are still bottom three, and we're down to 2 games now.
Patrick Bamford, then, quick chat about that. And
yeah,
he must have been the most confident man in the stadium with that penalty, because I'm not sure anybody else wanted him to take it. Bless him.
I'm not sure that the confidence you sometimes see in Bamford's body language or in what he does is necessarily reflected in the football that he's playing. I don't think there is a huge amount of confidence in the football he's playing. And I did feel like a lot of other people that Rodrigo should have taken that penalty. Rodrigo is the player who's been scoring most recently, scoring most regularly, the player out of the two of them who would consider himself to be in form. And it's not as if Bamford hasn't missed a penalty already this season. There was obviously, people will have seen the statement that Leeds released yesterday about the abuse that Bamford was taking on social media. And it does seem fairly remarkable that there is with some people this inability to critique footballers without going over the top. It was a bad penalty. It was a costly miss. I think it did cost Leeds a win on the day. But I said on Thursday, and I still maintain this, that there's a much bigger picture here. And the bigger picture is the fact that 2 years on from Bamford at his peak as we saw him, the end of that Premier League season when he got his England cap and he was scoring regularly in this division, they're still reliant on him in desperate circumstances. The close to going down, they need points urgently. And it's Bamford who's at 9, despite the fact that for 2 years, injuries have been a big problem for him. Form's been a big problem for him. He hasn't been scoring. And I do just think it's all symptomatic of Leeds' inability to move forward properly, certainly from the end of Bielsa's first season in the Premier League. But really, if we're being honest from the point of promotion, you look back now to 2020 and you consider what could have been built from that point onwards in comparison to what actually has been built now as we stand 3 years on. And the fact that you are still going back to the well to people like Bamford and also Adam Forshaw. I mean, Allardyce really spoke him up after the Manchester City game, and you could tell from what he was saying that he would like Forshaw to play every single minute of every single game that's left, because clearly in his mind, of the midfielders who are available, Forshaw is, the most dependable option if he was 100%. But the problem with Forshaw is that he isn't 100%. So on Saturday, Allardyce wasn't able to play him from the start. Brought him on at half-time because he felt that was needed. And I did think Forshaw had a decent game in that spell. But again, it's like having this ideal image of your head of what could work, as opposed to looking at how it's actually been for a few years now. And should at this stage you still be relying too heavily on Bamford, on Adam Forshaw, on people like that? I don't think you should. I think it puts undue pressure on them. And it comes back to the fact that Leeds squad building over the last couple of years has just not been good enough.
And perhaps the idea that the form of players who were in form would just continue indefinitely. And it's never linear like that, is it, Phil?
No, and is there really much of a difference between Bamford and, say, Illan Meslier? If you can see goals at the rate that Meslier has been, whether or not it's his fault, whether or not you blame him for that, or whether it's more to do with the wider structure of the team, it's like the water on stone effect, the drip, drip, drip that chips away at your confidence. And I guess if you're a centre forward who has spent 2 years, A, trying to get fit, but B, looking for goals that aren't really coming, and also, influential goals that are winning matches or are picking up big points, and there isn't enough of that, then it has to get into your head eventually. And I never ever subscribe to this idea that, that Bamford is indifferent about it, or that it doesn't matter to him or anything like that. I don't believe that. And there was a very good piece on The Athletic talking about Leicester over the weekend, and the insinuation that's been thrown at Leicester's players that they don't care enough, that they're not bothered. And okay, there must be some players in a relegation battle who aren't putting it in properly, and who are phoning in performances and kind of indifferent either way as to what happened. But I think as a rule, clubs who are involved in relegation fights are poor teams. Poor teams who are made to look poor by results and performances, and teams who look poor are less likely to look highly motivated than teams who are playing well. It's a kind of fact. So I don't doubt that Bamford thought he was going to score that, or felt that he could score that on Saturday, but it was the wrong decision. And perhaps somebody on the pitch should have saved him from himself by saying to Rodrigo, listen, you're the one who's been scoring goals all season. You take it. Who's
going to save us from Junior Firpo then? Talk me through your view of his afternoon.
Blimey. I thought it was a penalty. I know there was a slight nudge in the back, but if your hand's up like that, then quite honestly, if the ball hits it, you're not going to get away with it, are you? I thought, okay, he was there to win the penalty. Good underlapping run that Greenwood found, but lost his footing for Newcastle's first penalty. I thought he was quite lucky not to get sent off for the studs up tackle, which was not a good one. I thought he could have had a second yellow for that handball for the penalty, and he deserved to go for the foul on Anthony Gordon. And it was saving grace that was fractionally outside the box, which it was. That was definitely not a penalty kick. But all round, it was a nightmare of an afternoon, really, wasn't it? And another position that Leeds are going to have to address and look at when the summer comes.
Are you able to tell us whether that was a second yellow or a straight red? Because the ref in the stadium produced the second yellow, yet a lot of places are reporting it as a straight red.
I was under the impression it was a second yellow card. Yeah, I'm just waiting for the FA's website to update today, although it won't make any difference when it comes to the length of the suspension. It would be a 1 game for a straight red anyway. It would be 3 games for violent conduct or serious foul play if you get a straight red. But for anything like a professional foul, it's 1 game. So it would be him out of West Ham one way or the other. But as I say, I thought he was I thought he was quite lucky to be on the pitch at that stage anyway, and it was not a good day for him.
He's been toying with a red card for many months, hasn't he, as Junior Firpo? In terms of the refereeing performance then, I messaged you towards the back end of that game and said, I don't know what you think, but it feels like the refs lost control of this. And I know fans, we always moan about the refs giving us stuff and not giving us stuff. And I say that from a position of not being quite sure what he got right, what he got wrong, but it just never felt like he had a proper handle on the game. And I said on our coverage on the match ball, he was giving some stuff, like he was being really like pernickety, I guess, with stuff. Like he was giving everything, and then there were times when he was giving nothing as well. He was letting things slide, and you were never quite sure what it was going to be. What did you make of it all?
I just think a game like that is incredibly difficult to referee, and I sit and watch it and think rather them than me, really. I didn't think it was an especially bad refereeing performance, and I did think, obviously VAR was there as a safety net, which it kind of needed to be, but I thought mostly the big decisions he went for were right. He didn't see the handball, or he didn't award the handball, but VAR picked up on that. But he did get the foul on Firpo, which, to be honest, was so blatant that you couldn't miss it. But also Verba's challenge at the other end. Once you watched it back, you thought, oh, it's definitely a penalty. There's absolutely no question about that at all. I do think in that sort of game where the dynamic of it was pretty fascinating, because you could see at various points of the game, Leeds thinking to themselves, a point would be okay here. But actually, it's somewhere down the line, we've got to win a game, and we're right in this. And as time goes on, and it's 1-1, or it's 2-2, it's 2-1, whatever else, you've got a chance. So you have to start trying to decide: is this the moment to gamble? Even though it's Newcastle, even though Newcastle are way ahead of you in the table, once the game got a bit chaotic, as it did towards the end, and start to get frantic, does it just become a kind of 50-50 shootout where somebody could nick this and it could go either way? And it did begin to feel like that. But it felt like that even more because you could tell that Newcastle were not happy with the draw. You could tell them thinking, if we want to finish top four, this isn't going to do us a huge amount of good. Chances are Manchester United will close in, and then Liverpool play Leicester tonight. It could all start getting very, very dicey for them. So because there was so much riding on it, and because it was so high octane, I think that's just a really difficult game to referee. And quite honestly, I would say that I've seen far worse refereeing performances this season.
That's true, yeah. And the way you described the game there is like a 50-50. I would agree with that. If there wasn't so much riding on it, it would have been a really, really entertaining afternoon, I think, from a neutral perspective.
Well, there was still. I mean, this is it, isn't it? It's weird. It strikes me as all constantly odd how much we all hate football, despite how much we're all invested in it. It doesn't kill everybody bit by bit, but it's, those games, because there is so much at stake, and because you can feel it right from the off, you sort of end up loving them, regardless of how it goes. I don't know. I mean, I think Allardyce has been really pragmatic in the first two games, and probably we spoke a lot about Javi Gracia's pragmatism initially, but he's probably been even more pragmatic than Gracia in saying, look, we've absolutely got to be in these games. Obviously, you can see the tactics that are going on. You can see what he's doing. But he's quite clearly saying to the players, just don't let these get away from you. Don't let the games run away from you to the point where you've no chance of taking anything from it. Just hang in and hope that a little bit of quality, a little bit of ability here and there is going to make the difference. And I don't think it deserved to work at City. It almost did late on because of the way their finishing went. I think Leeds would have been pretty lucky to get out of that with anything at all. But I thought they were worth the point on Saturday. It felt as if Newcastle were constantly on the cusp of creating things that actually never really materialised. Constantly in positions or constantly on the cusp of creating chances, but then just not. And it wasn't that they didn't have any. I think they'll feel they played pretty well over the 90 minutes. But it was just a good game. But in the circumstances, you can never just sit back and say, "Oh, that was good," wasn't it? Because nothing's riding on it.
And it wasn't all just kick and rush either, was it? There were some passages of good play as well. It's not just long ball booting it up front.
No, and I did think you saw a very different approach to the City game. Allardyce had said beforehand, Newcastle playing a very different way. It's not going to be the same, and it absolutely wasn't. But he seems very adamant, listening to him speak afterwards, that this will go down to the last day and it will be riding on the Tottenham game. And it feels like it's going that way, doesn't it? It's very, very hard to predict what's going to happen this weekend coming up. And obviously Leicester play tonight, so that could make a difference depending on what happens with them. But you do get the feeling that we're going to come away from West Ham on Sunday with everything staked on the last day again.
I was going to say, I mean, we've got just over a minute left just to give you a heads up on that, Phil, but I've been convinced for a long time, just because of how the football gods treat Leeds United, that this was always going to go down to the last day. And I don't believe I'm not fatalistic in the slightest, but I knew this would go to the last day, and it's all pointing towards it, isn't it?
It makes you think it makes you think you shouldn't have bothered. You should have just scrapped 37 games this season, and everybody turned up on the last weekend of May, or the last weekend of the season in May, and gone for gold and seen what happened. But I'm with you. I mean, I suppose there are circumstances in which Leeds could be down effectively or officially at the weekend, but it just doesn't really feel like it's going that way. And I think Allardyce will come out of that Newcastle game feeling pretty optimistic about getting something at West Ham. West Ham were fairly dismal against Brentford, and are safe. They won't go down. Have European football to think about still. I think you'll see a big opportunity there. I very much doubt that Allardyce will want to go into the Tottenham game with the odds being ludicrous against Leeds. I think he'll want to give them the chance after West Ham of actually being in a position where they can do it without needing to rely on anything elsewhere.
Only a few seconds over there, Phil. I think we'll call that one a point on the board. We did all right there. 15-minute analysis of the weekend's game. It's tough with Leeds United sometimes, isn't it, to try and get it all into 15 minutes because so much happens all the time.
It is. It's never just plain 1-0 win, and everybody goes, "Oh, that was nice," and then heads off. But I do think that's the case. I think Allardyce will have it in his head, not only get to the last day of the season, but get to the last day of the season and know that if you win and you beat Tottenham, you're up no matter what. I think that'll be very much on his mind.
Yeah, and it's going to be a game for the ages, isn't it? If we find those circumstances unfold, but we'll park that one for another week. We've got the Phil Hayes Show back end of this week where you, me, and Michael will get together and we will preview the West Ham game and see what's in store there. It's just going to be the same again, isn't it? Like whatever we said last week, we'll be saying it again for this week.
Cannot wait.
We'll speak soon, Phil.
Thank you.
And we'll speak to you towards the back end of the week. See you soon.
The Square Ball Podcast.